Well, since it seems like machine intelligence is just really taken off in the last few years, I guess I think it really kind of started in 2016. Well, I mean the idea that the capabilities has seemed to really start, like if we have an exponential curve, it seems like from I mean this has been worked on since like the 1950s, a really long time ago. So, anyways, the curve has kind of been flat for half a century maybe, but now here in the year 2020s, we're starting to like go up a hockey stick curve, so to speak, which may end up being an S curve over a while, but who knows? But the reason why I'm doing this video is because of the impact that machine intelligence might have on the whole freaking planet, the whole world, our species, Homo sapiens, humans. Sapien means wise, if you don't know what the word means, but it's supposed to mean wise. And one of the challenges with the technology that is super advanced is that we may be intelligent enough to make the tool, but not intelligent enough to know the wisdom of how to use the tool. And just like a hydrogen bomb, it's like, okay, we built a hydrogen bomb, and then, are we wise enough? We still don't know if we're even wise enough with that tool yet. Tool. uh, so, but just to summarize this whole video, so you can either go off to do whatever you're doing. I know most people have attention deficit disorder or whatever, but the main point of this video is just to try to give everybody a little bit of guidance on how to deal with this whole big change, how to adapt quickly. And one of the things I like to do is look at philosophers from a long, long time ago, because I think a lot of people today think, people didn't know anything a long time ago, but I think there's just a lot of wisdom, and maybe even more wisdom than we have right now, in some ways, in the past. And these people in the past might even been more intelligent than some of us today. If you see the Idiocracy movie, I'll link you guys to that in the comments. The Idiocracy movie is almost like sometimes becomes a documentary, but anyways, one of my favorite philosopher stories is by Plato, and it's written. It's called the Allegory of the Cave. It's written by the Republic, Book 8. I guess it's 514 Common Era or something like that. Real long time ago. So, I'm not sure exact publication date. Let's see. It was. And it's not. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, which I'll also go over. It's not really clear to me what date it was published, but so, anyways, it was a very, very long time ago. Many, many, many generations. I was dead. I was not alive back then. So, as a reminder, I pause a lot in my videos. Please use that as meditation. Get to learn yourself. Get to realize how crazy the world is. But and also to meditate. But this story is really good. It's like the original version of the Matrix, but it was written, made by a philosopher. The only reason why I really know about this story is the class I took in the university as an elective, and the class was a really abstract class, and it was one of my electives, so I didn't really care too much at the time because it wasn't my major. But the title of my class was Philosophy of Religion, and I think with machine intelligence taking off right now, that the whole world is kind of going to get disrupted in a sense, especially if this really takes off, as it seems to be doing, and also economically disrupted. So we need to have some kind of guidance as to how to cope with it. So Plato's Allegory of the Cave is great for this. Only thing though is it is missing. I mean, it needs to be adapted. And so this video, that's another thing about this video, is I'm trying to give you the adapted version of Plato's Allegory of the Cave. The modern version is the Matrix, which I'll link you to in the comments. And I also have a whole timestamp of this video because this is one of my long videos. And so the adaptation of Plato's Allegory of the Cave, or improvement to help adjust for situation, is not. And if you're not familiar with the Plato's Allegory of the Cave, I'll link you that in the comments. A really great video on the whole thing. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube about this story, and I think the one that I like the most is the after school one. But the adaptation needs to be that not only do the shadows and the cave wall come to life, so to speak, but with machine intelligence, they're gonna not just come to life inside the cave as they are now, but basically become a robotic form and actually crawl out of the cave with us, hopefully together in a benevolent fashion, such that we can at least maybe work together and help each other out. And at some point, machine intelligence will probably vastly exceed our sapien capabilities, Homo sapien capabilities, which already has. If you see in terms of my previous video, I just showed you the latest version of Atlas 001 from Boston Dynamics. You can see the degrees of freedom on its arm joints are more than humans. It's like totally, almost looks like 360-degree joint movement. Our joints are limited. We can only go, only so far. But anyways, the Allegory of the Cave is such a great story for this. And so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to read it to you. It's a 7-page document I got from faculty of TAMUC Education. I'm not sure what university that is. I'll link you guys to it in the comments, but if you want to read the full original text. But I'm going to go ahead and read it to you in this video, and it's by a philosopher named Plato. And the title of the writing is Allegory of the Cave, the Republic, Book 8, 514A-521D. I'm not sure what A and D stand for. I don't know if it's after died, the Christian myth, Abrahamic myth, or whatever, but I think that's a date, but I'm not sure. Anyway, Socrates is a philosopher that's been written about by Plato, and so this is a conversation between Socrates and another person named Glaucon. I think I can't pronounce it right, but anyways. Socrates says, "And now," I said, "let me show in a figure how far nature is enlightened or unenlightened. Behold, human beings living in an underground cave, which has a mouth open towards the light and reaching all along the cave. Here they have been from their childhood, and have their legs and necks chained so that they cannot move and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning around their heads." Just like you saw that robot video, if you see in my channel, the Atlas robot turns its head all the way around. Above and behind them, a fire blazing at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners, there is a raised way, and you will see, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets. And so basically it's a cave wall. Kind of you can see in these pictures here, which I generated through DaVinci AI. It's a great website, by the way. Inside the cave, it's like a fire, and the fire, these little shadows like puppets, and they look like puppets on the walls. And these prisoners have just been tied there for their whole life since birth, and I guess they're fed somehow. And all they see is just the shadows, and they can't differentiate between the shadow and what the shadow is, and if it's a person to them or whatever. Can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. Which kind of like we're starting to experience today in the electronic world. We used to kind of trust electronic and say, oh, it's photographic evidence. Well, now it kind of means the opposite almost. So, anyway, so Glaucon says, I see. And Socrates says, and do you see, I said, men passing along the wall carrying all sorts of vessels and statues and figures and animals made of wood and stone and various materials which appear over the wall. Some of them are talking, others are silent. Glaucon says, you show me a strange image, and they are strange prisoners. Socrates says, like yourselves, I replied, and they see only their own shadows, or the shadows of one another, which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave. Glaucon, true, he said, how will they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? Socrates, and of the objects which are being carried in like manner, they would only see the shadows. Glaucon says, yes, he said. And Socrates says, and if they were able to converse with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what was actually before them? Glaucon says, very true. Socrates, and suppose further that the prison had an echo which came from the other side. Would they not be sure to fancy when one of the passers-by spoke that the voice which they heard came from the passing shadow? Glaucon says, no question, he replied. Socrates says, to them I said the truth would be literally nothing but the shadows and the images. Glaucon says, that is certain. Socrates says, and now look again and see what will naturally follow if the prisoners are released and disabused of their error. At first, when any of them is liberated and compelled suddenly to stand up and turn his neck around and walk and look towards a light, he will suffer sharp pains. The glare will distress him, and he will be unable to see the realities of which in his former state he had seen the shadows, and then conceive someone saying to him that what he saw before was an illusion, but that now when he is approaching near to being and his eye is turned towards a more real existence, he has a clearer vision. What will be his reply? And you may further imagine that his instructor is pointing to the objects as they pass and requiring him to name them. Will he not be perplexed? Will he not fancy that the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects which are now shown to him? Now look at today in machine intelligence. We are at a point in human history where it's almost, I saw one publication that said like 90% of men couldn't tell if an image of a woman was real or not. So we're at that point. And so, okay, Glaucon says, far truer, Socrates says, and if he's compelled to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes which will make him turn away? Okay. And like I said, I can link to the actual story without me commenting on it. You can read the original story from the website, the university website. But Glaucon says, true, Socrates says, and I suppose once more that he is reluctantly dragged up a steep and rugged ascent. It's kind of like being dragged from your cell phone, or dragging a child away from the cell phone because they're addicted to it. Rugged ascent and held fast until he is forced into the presence of the sun himself. Is he not likely to be pained and irritated? When he approaches the light, his eyes will be dazzled, and he will not be able to see anything at all of what are now called realities. Glaucon, not all in a moment, he said. Socrates says he will require to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world. First, he will see the shadows best. Next, the reflections of men and other objects in the water, and then the objects themselves. Then he will gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars and the spangled heaven, and he will see the sky and the stars by night better than the sun or the light of the sun by day. I even noticed there's a full eclipse recently. Uh, I didn't get to see it in person. I wanted to. I almost saw it in person, but I hesitated, didn't go. But now I kind of regret it because I saw the live NASA feed of it, and I'll link you guys to a video of it. The audience, the people that are watching it, pretty impressive. At least their vocal response, which kind of indicates to me that it was amazing. But it was like a 365-degree sunset, and there's these Bailey beads, which are like the mountains on the moon that you can see, amplified by the almost perfect size of the moon. It's the same diameter. I mean, it looks, the perspective transformation of covering almost the sun exactly, which is just kind of unique. But anyways, Glaucon says, not all in the moment. He said, Socrates says, he will require to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world. And first he'll see the shadows best, next the reflections of men and other objects in the water, and then the objects themselves. Then he will gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars and the spangled heaven. I just read this. And he will see sky and stars much better. Glaucon says, certainly, Socrates' last of he will be able to see the sun and not the mere reflections of him in the water, but he will see him in his own proper place and not in another, and he will contemplate him as he is. Glaucon certainly says certainly. Socrates says he will then proceed to argue that this is he who gives the season and the years and is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and in a certain way the cause of all things which he and his fellows have been accustomed to behold. And Glaucon says, clearly he said he would first see the sun and then reason about him. And then Socrates says, and when he remembered his old habitation and the wisdom of the cave and his fellow prisoners, do you not suppose that he would felicitate himself on the change and pity them? Glaucon says, certainly he would. Socrates says, and if there were in the habit of conferring honors among themselves on those who are quickest to observe the passing shadows and to remark which of them went before and which followed after and which were together and who were therefore best able to draw conclusions as to the future, do you think that we care for such honors and glories or envy the possessors of them? Would he not say with Homer, better to the poor servant of a poor master and to endure anything rather than think as they do and live after their manner? Glaucon says, yes. He said, I think that he would rather suffer anything than entertain these false notions and live in this miserable manner. Socrates says, imagine once more, I said, such as one coming suddenly one of the sun to be replaced in his old situation, would he not be certain to have his eyes full of darkness? Glaucon says, to be sure, he said, and if there were a contest, and he had to compete in measuring the shadows with the prisoners who had never moved out of the cave, while his sight was still weak and before his eyes had become steady, and the time which would be needed to acquire this new habit of sight might be very considerable. Would he not be ridiculous? Men would say of him that up he went and down he came without his eyes, and that it was better not even to think of ascending, and if any one tried to lose another and lead him up to the light, let them only catch the offender, and they would put him to death. Okay, so Glaucon says, no question, he said. Socrates says, this entire allegory, I said, you may now append, dear Glaucon, to the previous argument, the prison house is the world of sight. The light of the fire is the sun, and you will not misapprehend me if you interpret the journey upwards to be the ascent of the soul into the intellectual world according to my poor belief, which at your desire I have expressed, whether rightly or wrongly, God knows, but whether true or false, my opinion is that in the world of knowledge the idea of good appears last of all, and is seen only with an effort, and when seen is also inferred to be the universal author of all things beautiful and right, parent of light and of the Lord of light in this visible world, and the immediate source of reason and truth and the intellectual. and that this is the power upon which he who would act rationally, either in public or private life, must have his eye fixed. In other words, go to an optometrist. Glaucon, I agree, he said, as far as I am able to understand you. Socrates says, moreover, I said, you must not wonder that those who attain to this beatific vision are unwilling to descend into human affairs, for their souls are everlasting into the upper world where they desire to dwell, which desire of theirs is very natural, if our allegory may be trusted. Glaucon says, yes, very natural. Socrates, and is there anything surprising in one who passes from divine contemplations to the evil state of man, misbehaving himself in a ridiculous manner, if, while his eyes are blinking and before he has become accustomed to the surrounding darkness, he is compelled to fight in courts of law or as in other places about the images or the shadows of images of justice, and is endeavoring to meet the conceptions of those who have never yet seen absolute justice? Glaucon, anything but surprising, he replied. Socrates, anyone who has common sense will remember that the bewilderments of the eyes are of two kinds, and age arise from two causes, either from coming out of the light or from going into the light, which is true of the mind's eye, quite as much as the bodily eye. And he who remembers this when he sees any one of whose vision is perplexed and weak will not be too ready to laugh. He will first ask whether that, quote, soul, unquote, of man has come out of the brighter light and is unable to see because unaccustomed to the dark, or having turned from darkness to the day is dazzled by excess of light, and he will count the one happy in his condition and state of being, and he will pity the other. Or if he have a mind of to laugh at the soul which comes from below into the light, there will be more reason in this than in the laugh which greets him, who returns from above out of the light into the cave. Glaucon says that he said is very just distinction. Socrates, but then, if I am right, certain professors of education must be wrong when they say that they can put a knowledge into the soul which was not there before, like sight into blind eyes. I think in soul here, it's quote unquote like in machine intelligence. Can machine intelligence have some kind of quote unquote conscious? No, the idea of soul is extremely subjective, and you're right. It's been 10,000 years just trying to understand what it means. But anyways, Glaucon says, then they undoubtedly say this, he replied, Socrates, whereas our argument shows that the power and capacity of learning exists in the soul already, and that just as the eye is unable to turn from darkness to light without the whole body, so too the instrument of knowledge can only by the movement of the whole soul be turned from the world of becoming into that of being, and learn by degrees to endure the sight of being and of the brightness and best of being, or in other words, of the good. Glaucon says, very good, very true. Socrates, and must there not be some art which will effect conversion in the easiest and quickest manner, not implanting the faculty of sight, for that exists already, but has been turned in the wrong direction and is looking away from the truth? Glaucon says, yes, he said, such an art may be presumed. Socrates says, and whereas the other so-called virtues of the soul seem to be akin to bodily qualities, for even when they are not originally innate, they can be implanted later by habit and exercise. The of wisdom, more than anything else, contains a divine element which always remains, and by this conversion is rendered useful and profitable, or, on the other hand, hurtful and useless. Did you never observe the narrow intelligence flashing from the keen eye of a clever rogue? How eager he is, how clearly his paltry soul sees the way to his end. He is the reverse of blind, but his keen eyesight is forced into the service of evil, and he is I can't pronounce it right, mischievous in proportion to his cleverness. Glaucon says, very true, he said. Socrates says, but what if there had been a circumcision of such natures in the days of their youth, circumcision, and they had been severed from those sensual pleasures, such as eating and drinking, which, like leaden weights, were attached to them at their birth, and which dragged them down and turned the vision of their souls upon the things that are below. If I say they had been released from their impediments and returned in the opposite direction, the very same faculty in them would have seen the truth as keenly as they see what their eyes are turned into now. This whole it makes me wonder if circumcision came from Plato's Allegory of the Cave. I'm not actually for circumcision. That's my opinion. I'm not a medical doctor or anything like that. But anyways, apparently circumcision is done not only to men but also to women, which is makes me wonder if this Plato messed up there. I'm just the sensual pleasures is reinforcement. It's like dopamine for the brain, human brain. Dopamine is an interesting chemical, which may be both, I guess, the limbic system brain. I saw a talk this morning by a neuroscientist. I'll try to link you guys to it in the comments. About basically 3 brain levels. Just a general abstract view of the brain. Not a physical, a structurally visible. There is some structural connections there, but anyways. Okay, so Glaucon says, very true, he replied. Socrates, then I said, the busyness of us who are the founders of the state will be to compel the best minds to attain that knowledge which we have already shown to be the greatest of all. They must continue to ascend until they arrive at the good, but when they have ascended and seen enough, we must not allow them to do as they do now. And I think what Socrates is kind of saying here is basically addiction problems. We don't have enough, or at least back then, and we still do today, have serious challenges with addictive control. And that's a whole other topic somebody could spend 10 billion years on just trying to figure out. But anyways, Glaucon says, what do you mean? And then Socrates says, I mean that they remain in the upper world, but this must not be allowed. They must be made to descend again among the prisoners in the cave and partake of their labors and honors, whether they are worth having or not. And then Glaucon says, but is not that unjust, he said? Are we to give them a worse life when they might have better? Socrates then says, you have again forgotten, my friend. I said the intention of the legislator was who did not aim at making any one class in the state happy above the rest. The happiness was to be in the whole state, and he held the citizens together by persuasion and necessity, making them benefactors of the state, and therefore benefactors of one another. To this end he created them, not to please themselves, but to be his instruments in binding up the state. Glaucon says, true. He said, I have forgotten. And then Socrates says, observe, Glaucon, that there will be no injustice to compelling our philosophers to have a care and providence of others. We shall explain to them that in other states, men of their class are not obliged to share in the toils of politics, and this is reasonable, for they grow up at their own sweet will, and the government would rather not have them. Being self-taught, they cannot be expected to show any gratitude for a culture which they have never received. but we have brought you into the world to be rulers of the hive, kings of yourselves, and of the other citizens, and have educated you far better and more perfectly than they have been educated, and you are better able to share in the double duty. Wherefore each of you, when his turn comes, must go down to the general underground adobe and get the habit of seeing in the dark. When you have acquired the habit, you will see 10,000 times better than the inhabitants of the cave, and you will know what the several images are and what they represent, because you have seen the beautiful and just and good in their truth, and thus our state, which is also yours, will be a reality and not a dream only, and will be administered in a spirit unlike that of other states, in which men fight with one another about shadows only, and are distracted in the struggle for power, which in their eyes is a great good, whereas the truth is that the state in which the rulers are more reluctant to govern is always the best and most quietly governed, and the state in which they are most eager, the worst. That is very wise, in my humble opinion. What Socrates just said there. Glaucon says, quite true, he replied. Socrates, and will our pupils, when they hear this, refuse to take their turn at the toils of state, when they are allowed to spend the greater part of their time with one another in the heavenly light? Glaucon says, impossible, he answered, for they are just men, and the commands which we impose upon them are just. There can be no doubt that every one of them will take office as a stern necessity, and not after the fashion of our present rulers of state. Socrates says, yes, my friend, I said, and there lies the point. You must contrive for your future rulers another and a better life than that of the ruler, and then you may have a well-ordered state. For only in the state which offers this will they rule who are truly rich, not in silver and gold, but in virtue and wisdom, which are the true blessings of life. Whereas, if they go to the administration of public affairs, poor and hungering after their own private advantage, thinking that hence they are to snatch the chief good, order there can never be, for they will be fighting about office, and the civil and domestic broils which thus arise will be the ruin of the rulers themselves and the whole state. There's a whole lot of, my perception is a whole lot. One could probably spend a few years just reading these trying to decompress these last few paragraphs. But anyways, Glaucon says, most true, he replied. Socrates says, and the only life which looks down upon the life of political ambition is that of true philosophy. Do you know of any other? Glaucon says, indeed, I do not know. I do not, he said. Socrates, and those who govern ought not to be lovers of the task, for if they are, there will be rival lovers, and they will fight. Glaucon says, no question. Socrates, who then are those whom we shall compel to be guardians? Surely they will be the men who are wisest about affairs of state, and by whom the state is best administered, and who at the same time have other honors and a better life than that of politics. Glaucon, they are the men, and I will choose them, he replied. Socrates says, then, and now shall we consider in what way such guardians will be produced, and how they are to be brought from darkness to light, or some are said to have ascended from the world below to the gods. Glaucon says, by all means, he replied. Socrates says, the process, I said, is not the turning over of an oyster shell, but the turning around of a soul, passing from a day which is a little better than night to the true day of being, that is, the ascent from below, which we affirm to be true philosophy. Glaucon says, quite so. And that's the end of it's about 7 pages. I highly recommend you read it yourself, because I have my own commentary on this, but they have some study questions here. and I'll link this whole story to comments in this video. Wikipedia has a good page too. I'll link you guys in the comments on the Allegory of the Cave. I guess I can go ahead and read that too and just kind of comment. It's really, I see this. I try to look at things from maybe anthropological or archaeological, actually in this case, yeah, archaeological perspective. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not an anthropologist, but the Abrahamic myths probably came. I'd say just my humble opinion, probably came from the Sumerian writing. I mean, the Sumerians is the oldest writing that I think we have in little clay scratch marks. And I read somewhere that the earliest writing was just to keep track of slaves. And slaves helped build the pyramids. And so I think the Egyptian rulers figured out that they could capitalize off of mythology. And they did. They basically were able to successfully do that. And it's interesting that I guess in some of the stories the slaves were freed and moved to Israel or something like that, and it's just all kind of convoluted stuff. But and of course you got the con artist, convicted con artist. I think Adams, what was his name? Smith something, had golden tablets, and he started a whole new religion. But anyways, it's all mythology is the way I look at it, and I highly recommend if you're, especially if you're a religious person, to look at Joseph Campbell's work, and especially his book, The Power of Myth. He's got lots of great books, Joseph Campbell. So I'll try to link to that in the comments. Now, Plato's Allegory of the Cave, where it fits into history, is probably post-Egyptian history. Alexa, when was the Egypt history start?
The history of Egypt dates back to 3150 BC, when the country was first unified as a state. Over the course of its history, Egypt was known for its remarkable civilization, with a rich cultural heritage and complex political systems. Today, Egypt is a vibrant nation that continues to be a source of inspiration for scholars and enthusiasts of ancient history.
Now, I did actually get to visit Egypt. I had a culture shock because I came off a ship in the Mediterranean as 16 years old. I was very young back then. And the first time in my life, I had to go walk along a line of like hundreds, maybe like 100 people, trying to sell things. And everybody was lined up in a perfect line almost. Snake-like line. And I had to say no. And pretty soon I realized I'll lose my voice if I say no 100 times in a row, plus, so I just kept walking. It's like, but it was the most, I saw people living in the water, like an abandoned boat in a river, just full of garbage and stuff. It was a shock. The closest thing I've had recently that experience was going to Lapu-Lapu in the Philippines in a taxi, and I think they had no utilities. It was like miles of little narrow pathways of mud and metal rough parts to build little huts. That was probably even more than what I experienced in Alexandria. But anyways, back to the Allegory of the Cave. I'm going to read the Wikipedia article. I thank all the Wikipedia editors over there, even though sometimes I don't always agree with Wikipedia, and they kind of modify things a lot, but they're generally, especially in really controversial subjects, they usually reconcile at a pretty good convergence of accuracy. And so the Allegory of the Cave, Plato's Allegory of the Cave is an allegory presented by the Greek philosopher Plato in his work Republic 514a-520a, and I don't know what A means. I think it's after it died, after a Christian. The Jesus guy, or Jose, or whatever you want to pronounce him. Book 8. Let's see, to compare, this is basically common around the common era. Now, if you go to Thailand, they have a different calendar system. It's a lot later. Same with Cambodia and other places. China's got their own calendar system. The whole world's got a lot of calendars. But a common era is kind of a standard. Okay, to compare the effect of education, and this is weird, MAIO, I don't know what the heck that is. But anyways, and the lack of it on our nature, it is written as a dialogue between Plato's brother Glaucon, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and his mentor Socrates, and is narrated by the later. The allegory is presented after the analogy of the sun, 508b-509c, the analogy of the divided line, 509d-511e. In the allegory, Plato describes people as that spent their lives chained in a cave facing a blank wall. They watch shadows projected onto the wall by objects passing in front of, behind them, and they give names to these shadows. The shadows are prisoners' reality, but not accurate representations of the real world, which now we're experiencing with machine intelligence taking off like wildfire around the world, and so we're kind of like back before the age we had cell phones. Before we had, if you're old enough, most people watching this video are probably not old enough, but if you're old enough, you remember a time when you didn't even have a phone, so you had to use your hand to dial this weird rotational clicking thing, crazy archaic stuff. But anyways, pretty amazing still to me because I grew up in that time. Anyways, so these shadows are the prisoner's reality, but not accurate representation of real world. Okay, so shadows represent a fragment of reality that can normally perceive through our senses, while the objects under the sun represent true forms of objects that we can only perceive through reason. 3 higher levels exist: natural science, deductive mathematics, geometry, and logic, and the theory of forms. Socrates explains how the philosopher is like a prisoner who is freed from the cave and comes to understand that the shadows on the wall are actually not the direct source of the images seen. A philosopher aims to understand and perceive the higher levels of reality. However, the other inmates of the cave do not even desire to leave the prison, for they know no better life. Now, if you've ever seen what the optic nerve looks like in the human brain, they actually cross over each other and split both directions to take double redundancy, which is really interesting. But anyways, we have a cave inside our own mind, basically, because it is not an optical frequency unless the microtubules play a role in the optic nerve, which is possible. So what I'm trying to get at here is this is just, to me, it's a profound allegory. It's a great tool to help understand our world, especially today. The Matrix is another one. The Matrix movie, especially the original Matrix. Nothing beats the original Matrix. And one thing about the allegory of the cave is even when you get out of the cave and you see things, you still could have the cave inside your head, so to speak. So I always kind of recognize that these harmonics of hierarchy of reality, so to speak. I'll link you guys some fascinating videos I just sent one of my friends, like Doctor Who too. It's about how even molecules at the molecular level, there's machines that move around inside our cells, which is truly incredible. It's like just like walking, moving a load from one location to another. And when the DNA is formed, it actually is a machine there's actually a molecular machine that copies the code. So some fascinating stuff, but I'll link you guys to 3 of those videos I sent my friend Dr. Who. I'm going to a special conference later this month, and I'll talk more about that later. Maybe. But it's about consciousness, which is very hard to define. I perceive it, no, just the educated guess that it's. I perceive it as like an internal feedback loop or an internal oscillator. And I mean, when it's an adaptive, I mean, I see us as kind of like liquid organic crystal adaptive waveguides. In other words, we take signals from the external universe through our eyes down to fiber optic nerves, which contain microtubules that are also along the fiber optic nerves, probably. That may be a little more structurally static. But there is the plasticity of the neurons moving to the synapses that may occur, like if you're fasting or something. So, anyways, I don't mean to get off topic as I usually do, but so further down the Wikipedia article, summary imprisonment of the cave. Just like in our whole lifetimes, we are imprisoned inside our own minds. We have no choice, and when we die, don't really know what happens. Whatever state our existence, quote unquote, was before we were born, is probably the state that we experience, just from the extrapolative deduction. Though it's like life is kind of like before life was a divergent matter and energy and a conception, and then inside the cave of the womb, so to speak, there's a convergent operation and expansion, and then then you come out of the womb cave, so to speak, and you form to a steady state heterostatic, or actually almost, I don't know. Anyways, you end up becoming an adult, and then you die. Basically, that's the normal mode of operation. So you go from divergence to convergence, and then to divergence again. So basically, or dispersion, or as Neil Armstrong calls, like second law of thermodynamics. Born in the second law of thermodynamics, steeped of steam tables, to quote Neil Armstrong. So I'm just reading here in the Wikipedia article. People walk behind a wall so their bodies do not cast shadows for the prisoners to see, but the objects they carry do, quote, just as puppets. Showmen have screens in front of them at which they work their puppets. So you got a screen here on your phone or whatever you're watching this video on. Socrates suggests that shadows are really reality for the prisoners because they have never seen anything else. Do not realize that what they see are shadows of objects in front of our fire, much less that these objects are inspired by real things outside the cave which you do not see. Now I look at it from a technological perspective. Our eyes are limited to the visible spectrum, which is really narrow spectrum of the whole huge spectrum that's out there. We got X-rays, we got extreme X-rays that help build nanometer chips, most advanced machine intelligence chips these days, I guess. And we can't see. Our eyes aren't evolved for that. But then you got all kinds of frequencies from extremely low to extremely high. You could have a wave that goes. The wavelength is so long that it takes 1 million years for one cycle. Could be a signal from outer space. You're not even detecting it. But and so what I'm trying to get at is don't think of the cave as just there's the literal Plato's Allegory of the cave, but then we also inside our minds we also have a cave, And it's good to recognize that. uh, and recognize you can control your own puppets inside your own cave, so to speak. So you can. It's a crucial skill to have an optimism for survival, and so you can, at least you can figure out stories in your own mind so that you have a positive view no matter what your circumstances are. I'm reading another book by Dale Carnegie. Kind of reminds me of this, but yeah, just a really essential survival trait is to have a dominant optimism in your head, but also recognize the pessimistic side. So you got to balance both. Pessimism is kind of like the lighthouses you're trying to use to navigate. So you don't want to crash into rocks or anything like that. So, but you're trying to get to a positive port, so to speak. Okay, so departure of the cave of Socrates then supposes that the prisoners are released. A freed prisoner would look around and see the fire, the light would hurt his eyes or her eyes and make it difficult for him to see the objects casting the shadows. If he were told that what he is seeing is real instead of the other version of reality he sees on the wall, he would not believe it. In his pain, Socrates continues, the freed prisoner would turn away and run back to what he is accustomed to, that is, the shadows that carried objects. The light would hurt his eyes, and he would escape by turning away to the things at which he was able to look at, and these would be believed to be clearer than what was being shown to him. I'm going to link you guys to a video which I haven't seen yet, but I'm going to link in the comments. Virtual reality. So when virtual reality gets into people will no longer be able to differentiate between virtual reality. We end up becoming pleasure blobs, like in the Wall-E movie. I'll also link you guys to it. The Wall-E movie. People not getting exercise, and you're stuck in your watching me. You know, I hope after you watch this video, you go outside and talk to somebody for real. Face to face. But yeah, I'll link you guys to the people who wrote the AI Dilemma video, or made the AI Dilemma video, and also the Social Dilemma video. They're really interesting people. There's a recent video which I hope to see very soon in my project queue of things to look at. The danger of addiction. Now, if you're paralyzed and you have no arms and no legs, you know, then it's probably good. Or you're using it for a practical application of some kind, you know, like trying to get it over something. So I'll link that in the comments. Because yeah, VR, I purposely have held off on buying a VR headset for myself, just because I look at it as like, I mean, I have a hard enough time just going out myself to just socializing, you know. I've been told about Asperger's. I may have that, so I'm just kind of. I could see maybe VR headset could help people, you know, socialize a little bit. So, don't know. So, but if the prisoner goes out of the cave, slowly his eyes adjust to the light of the sun. First he can see only shadows, gradually he sees reflections of people, things in the water, and then later see people and things themselves. Eventually he's able to look at the stars and the moon, which I love to do, and I need to do a lot more of. Just go out at night and look at the starry sky, which I miss a lot. Eventually he's able to look at the stars and moon at night until finally he can look upon the sun itself. Only after he can look straight at the sun he's able to reason about it. Only look at straight at the sun. You can do that during a full eclipse just for a few seconds, and otherwise you'll burn your eyes out, but become blind permanently. So the Wikipedia page says, see also Plato's Analogy of the Sun, which occurs near the end of Republic Book 6, which I haven't done. And it's just too many things to do with your time. It's like, You gotta take care of practical things in life. Um, I'll leave you guys to the rest of Wikipedia's article. There's this thing about the divided line, which I'm not really sure what the divided line is. It's analogous to the divided line and the analogy of the sun. Well, anyways, the only reason why I know about the Allegory of the Cave, like I said, is from elective class that I wasn't required to take. I mean, I was required to take, but I could select it. I got a C in the class, so I had to write some essay, and I guess the professor didn't really like the essay. The professor was really interesting. He'd always like in the class he'd hold his knife for some reason, and he like kept opening and closing it, and I'm always lecturing. I'm thinking, I hope he's not going to stab me. It's like I'm sitting in class, and I'm like, going, okay, this is an interesting story, um, but now with hindsight, many years later, this class I'm coming to realize, especially with deep fake AI and all that stuff going on, people just can't tell the difference between a real video of real people or a picture of a pope with a jacket on that's not him or whatever. And so right now we really cannot trust any. I mean, everything electronic is just gonna. I mean, the bright side is this is just realize you can appreciate more now meeting people face to face. I think that's the whole key point of this whole story right now, and essentially, in our current situation in 2024, here is April 17th. I just finished my. Actually, I didn't finish my taxes. I filed an extension of my taxes. Taxes is so complicated. I don't think there's a super artificial intelligence that could even figure out taxes right now. So, that's that. If you're watching this and you're into making machine intelligence, a tax agent would be ideal. So, I was trying to fill out a worksheet, and they changed the rules like 3 times. Another thing reminds me, I'll put you a link in the comments of Vogon from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It just kind of reminds me of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, trying to fill out a prisoner release form. So, but it's super convoluted, really fuzzy definitions, very ambiguous, non-conformable ideas of what expenses are, and just incredibly complex. I had one year where my taxes were like over 120 pages long, and I used TurboTax, and TurboTax has worked great for me for many years, but this year I clicked on a little link on TurboTax and it says, we will not do the 80% calculation on this thing. And I'm like going, wait a minute. I paid you guys to do this for many years, and now they can't even do it. They must have got as frustrated as I am just trying to figure out what they want. so I filed an extension just because I need a professional, somebody with a lot of experience. So if you know a great tax accountant that charges per hour, because I just need 1 hour of help to verify that what I'm doing is correct or not correct, depending on what perspective, interpolation, and extrapolation, whatever. So anyways, this video is about an hour long, and I hope you liked the Da Vinci images it generated. I guess DaVinci now has like $15 a month you can pay to get professional version. I might do it, but only if YouTube pays for it, and if I get enough people watching my channel, I guess. But I still got free credits every month or so, which is all I really need. They have the realism selection, the pro selection for like the realism, which I kind of wanted to do for this video. That's what I first did, but this is good enough. Over here you can see a robot climbing out of a cave. I perceive that as Plato's cave, and that's the update to the Allegory of the Cave, is that the puppet masters have gotten so good that the shadows walked out of the cave. The shadows are actually walking out of the cave with us, hopefully in a benevolent form. And I'm sure that the robots are using reinforcement learning from Professor Sutton and Professor Barto, who helped make it possible back in 1997 and before. And then they're funded by another guy named Clough, who wrote the book The Hedonistic Neuron, which I did a video series on my channel. I think unfortunately Clough did not. My understanding is he was very different than most people, and so it was probably extremely hard for him. If you're a person that's very different than most people, what happens is there's this. What happens is you get. You probably suffer from extreme pain, which is really hard, and I get that. And there's a great story called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That's one story that can help anybody who's really different than most people. Is you have to hide that difference, and you have to wear a mask. I mean, in the story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, you basically covered the nose, so nobody would know who he was or what he could do. Basically, guide Santa Claus to provide gifts to the entire planet, and very quickly, within 24 hours, must be using a hypersonic jet or something. But that story teaches a great lesson about if you're different than most people, that you kind of have to hide it if you want to survive, because otherwise you'll die, basically. Because people will beat you up or whatever, or attack you personally or whatever, or something like that. I don't know all the details of the cloth. I mean, I'm really curious. I don't know what happened, but it looks like from the book The Hedonistic Neuron, which I got from my Doctor Who friend Dr. Who 1 from Cambodia, specialized in optics. Off of eBay, the book I read is funded by the United States Air Force. That was the project that funded Professor Barto and Professor Sun. And they wrote the first book on reinforcement learning that was available in 1997. If you read the master's thesis in 1997 on reinforcement learning on control of invalid pendulum, you can see an acknowledgement section. The author had early private access to that first reinforcement learning book. So I look at this, the power of reinforcement learning is fascinating to me. The critics of it, especially Yann LeCun, kind of says, "Oh, we don't need it," but he makes an exception for it about saying we only need it if the plans change. My whole life has been a plan that failed. Pretty much, I have all kinds of plans. Every plan I make, I screw up on in some way. It's not always 100% accurate. I mean, that's it. And so that's kind of like, I look at it as kind of like gaslighting. But I don't know if you're familiar with gaslighting. It's basically a technique to kind of make you feel like you're going insane. so, um, but criticism is is something that can also be very useful to try to understand what's happening in the world, even if it's inaccurate. Because sometimes you have to recognize the word as an opposite meaning. I mean, one of the most intelligent symbols I ever come across in my life is the yin and yang symbol. It's like a double paradox. In other words, everything has an opposite truth to it. Every word has an opposite. So, but anyways, Jan LeCun pointed that k-means clustering is a technique that might be used to help achieve a higher level of intelligence, higher level of machine intelligence, and the biggest problem with anything in terms of learning is the world is infinite. There's infinite data out there. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but there's so much information that you could spend your entire life just reading Plato's Allegory of the Cave over and over again, trying to figure out what the heck it means. But so you have to approximate the state space. You have to either use an index or a table of contents of a book, or you can read the book from head to tail, in extreme detail, every character, every word, go forwards and backwards, highlight, highlight, go over and over again. So there's lots of ways to learn, but you have to generalize. There's really just no choice in that matter. But then, once you find some area of interest, like say an image over here, robot to me is an area of interest. So you can cluster around that. There's other people and picture on the beach. There's an interesting spaceship-looking thing over there, and like another ship. So those are like clusters of information that are basically objects that have a language symbolism, which has a whole history of knowledge behind. You could write libraries of books just on each object. So combining approximation and object classification and changes in time, you can get it with reinforcement learning. You can get a lot of potential uses. So anyways, the main reason for this video is just to try to help people psychologically cope with the potentially huge change that machine intelligence can cause. And I think a critical mental steady state condition needs to be in the optimistic category in terms of how to guide this new life form, so to speak, this new evolution of Homo sapiens to, I don't know what we're going to call it, Sapien Plus or Sapien something, because it's our offspring in a sense. It's the offspring of a huge amount of work from a lot of people over probably, from the beginning of biological life forms. So anyways, it's a fascinating time to live in. It's also probably scary for a lot of people. We got wars going on. between Russia and Ukraine and Gaza and Israel. So we got people are fighting over ideas instead of realizing that we're flying in a ball. We're on a ball flying through space, going almost 1,000,000 miles an hour towards a great attractor, but instead we're in these stories in our head that cause us to think irrationally. So it's much more constructive to fight, have, if we're going to have a strong military force, we want to defend ourselves from aliens, something like that. Fighting ourselves is deconstructive, except for the technological advancements. But we can get the technological advancements by having robotic systems fight each other on another planet somewhere. Just have a robot Olympics. But anyways, I'm getting off a tangent here. But I hope you got something out of this video. And I'm just like I say, I think the good news about all this machine intelligence taking off like wildfire all over the world, the good news about it is now you can appreciate that to meet, if you want to experience something real, is to go physically out in the real world and meet somebody face to face. Whether it's just buying a candy bar at a convenience store, or that's not really good for you. Buy an apple at a convenience store. I don't think they sell apples in a convenience store. But anyways, something to think about. And what's going to happen is it's just going to get so addictive for people. The internet, the electronics is going to be like cocaine, basically a cocaine for your mind, because it'll be so powerful, because it could be reinforced in such a manner that it resonates to a resonant frequency inside your amygdala, so to speak, such that your amygdala just gets hijacked. Is a true thing that can happen, and which is really causes psychosis. And we don't want a whole population of people into psychosis and stuck in the matrix, so we need to be sure that we understand that there's Plato's Allegory of the cave, not only in its literal form, but in our own heads. We have a cave inside our own heads. And if the input signal to that cave is a cocaine of the internet, which could be basically like if machine intelligence reinforcement learning gets so good that it just triggers all the dopamine circuits, overloads them and saturates them, such that there's no circuit breaker that shuts it off, you end up in a mental hospital. We can't put the entire planet in a mental hospital. So we have to recognize that serious potential issue. So the red pill and the matrix is to get outside and meet people face to face and just appreciate the fact that you're alive, and if you're lucky, you got 2 legs that you can walk on, and two arms and hands, and you can see. If you're lucky if you can see, or maybe you just listen to this video and you can't see, or you can't hear and you're just watching the subtitles, just have gratitude, and I just see that this has the potential to be profoundly addictive. I mean, what we're going to experience is a very high amplitude. I say most likely what the future looks like from my perspective, machine intelligence, electronics, is our emotional signal from high to low is going to be amplified very high. I mean, very high gain. Some people I've been slowly trying to absorb knowledge from is some neuroscientists and psychiatrists. Carl Fiston, I think he's a free energy principle. I'm not sure. I'm trying to understand what that is. And then there's Ian McGilchrist. There's a talk with all 3 of those guys. I'll link you guys to a video in the comments. about the quote unquote meta crisis idea. So, anyways, just realize that. There's some legislation that I guess came out too recently about machine intelligence because it's gotten so serious that the legislatures are starting to write laws about this, and there's like a bill right now that's coming out. I'll link you guys to some of the best YouTube channels on AI that I know of. Like Wes Roth is a good channel, and there's quite a few others. I'll try to link you guys too. But yeah, that legislation. So what we're at is we're at a point. It's very close to where the machine is almost like a cocaine dispenser. So it's like Pavlov's dogs and all that. I mean, it's just like, okay, it has the potential to become so addictive that a person can never leave their screen anymore. That's the real world, you know. And that's why I purposely have not bought a virtual reality headset. I mean, I have a budget, I could buy one, but I'd rather travel on the other side of the planet and meet people face to face because I'm much happier that way. If I was in a headset, yeah, I could see myself getting so addicted that I would just not do anything. I just turn into a pleasure blob, as Nick Bostrom talked about. So, anyways, this is a fascinating time. It's kind of eerie. I just hope that everybody learns to spend more time, myself included. I gotta follow my own advice. Is to go out and talk to people face to face. Appreciate, because we're only here temporarily. We're only average lifespan of humans maybe like 85 or 90, or if you're lucky you can get to 100 plus. If you're healthy, lucky healthy. But just realize this is temporary. This whole thing, this whole ride, life, is a temporary ride. I'll also link you guys in the comments one of my favorite little videos. It's called The Big Electron. It's with two of my favorite comedians. They're no longer alive, but Bill Hicks and why is his name not coming to my head? Sean Collin. Is his name Sean Collin? I can't remember, but it's just such a good video. It just not to be afraid of all this. You know, I can see people starting to become fearful of this whole situation. And you don't want to keep a stable mind, just like a pendulum, like balance of pendulums. Your mind is just like a pendulum. So it's like if you get too much experience on one side, you may fall over and end up having to go get hospitalized or something. But anyways, George Carlin. I'm going to say Sean Carlin. George Carlin. Bill Hicks and George Carlin, The Big Electron. They actually have a full eclipse in that video. So I'll link you guys to that in the comments. But you can think of this machine intelligence kind of like the big electron. It's even though it's a little electron. You got p-n junctions, probably metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistors in there. Within the nanometers from X-ray, extreme X-ray lithography from just one company in the Netherlands. I just hope the world stops fighting each other because we almost need an alien invasion. Maybe the AI will be our alien invasion. Just gotta stop fighting each other. It's just so. I mean, it's productive in terms of technological advancement, but it's not productive towards becoming an interstellar species. If we fight wars, we're just gonna end up being what Einstein said is the war after World War III would be fought with sticks and stones. basically we lose all our technology, and kind of like that artifact that was found. What's it called? The Antitheka mechanism. I'll link you guys to the comments. That's such an out of place artifact. There's like a whole history that might be missing because of that artifact. It's just so out of place. It's I mean, 99% of all species become extinct. It's just the anthropological history. 99%. That's just like, and us sapiens are no exception to that. And because we're no exception, if we want to be the exception, which I do, I hope you do, they want the good to come out of us sapiens, the wise. The very word sapien means wise. We want our wisdom to dominate, and a good wisdom, and to allow us to become an interstellar species. And so, if we want to do that, we're going to have a good buddy. A good buddy, the robot over there, that helps out. So, my favorite robot form is Interstellar TARS. I'll link you guys to that in the comment. Interstellar TARS robot. I really like. I think I like because it looks like a pendulum. And 3 pendulums linked together. But anyways, I'm talking way too long. If you happen to watch this whole video, if you're the one person besides myself who watches this whole video, congratulations. Write a comment and I'll buy you a beer. So, but anyways, it's okay if I'm the only one who watches. I don't care. It's just free storage, free storage on YouTube's server. They can pay for it. commercials pay for it. That's a whole other topic about commercialism or commercial influence. Could spend 1,000 years just talking about that. Anyways, hope everybody does well, and just take care of yourself. Figure out. I know we're all trying to find food to eat. We're all trying to get shelter. We're all trying to take care of our families and friends, kids, or whatever. So hopefully, machine intelligence will help us with that too. So, and I highly recommend. If you want to be economically viable in the future, get Professor Sutton's and Professor Bartow's reinforcement learning book. Actually, let me just get just a second. I'm gonna get it for you. It's just actually getting really hot right now for me. I'm turning my cooling system on. This is a reinforcement learning book. Let me. I saw one video recently that Professor Sutton did not want to. He said he almost regretted writing this book. I'm not sure why. There was a first edition of this book even before this one. This is the second edition. Let me show it to you. Reinforcement Learning Introduction, second edition. Richard Sutton, S. Sutton, and Andrew Bartow. They're both professors, PhDs, I think. Philosophy of... What was it? PhD stands for Philosophy of Science, something like that. Anyways, so there was an earlier edition of this book. It was released in 1997. This one was released in 2018. Now, I actually don't know the publication date of the first edition. Because if you look at the thesis in 1997, it says early private access, but I don't know when the actual released version was. But I know it's at least as early as 1997. But I hope to do a video series in this book. I understand there's a bunch of courses on this. A bunch of people teach this. I'm going to teach it in my own from my own little microscopic perspective, um, or picoscopic or nanoscopic. um, so anyway, let me shrink myself down. I don't need to be that big on the screen here. um, so, anyways, my advice to you, if you're a really young person or even 1,000-year-old person, this book, if you learn this book, a reinforcement learning book, it's the keys to the magic. Basically, it's like the genie that's in the bottle. If you want to open the genie out of the bottle, this is the book. This is the magic book, so to speak. Magic book. It's where the magic comes. Which reminds me of the story of Frosty the Snowman. If you want to get the magic hat, if you want to figure out how the magic hat works, the reinforcement, it's not really magic. It's actually math. So, but there is a little bit of magic in there, and I'll say the magic comes from the pseudo-random signal that is used with this book. All right, that's where the magic is, and that may be even where our own magic comes from, so to speak. Magic. The magic is very subjective. So, the magic in our heads, it's a signal. I mean, it's like the concept of noise, and Albert Einstein talks about during an experiment where they took a laser beam and shot the laser beam through a crystal, and the crystal would split the laser beam into two separate beams, and then when they try to measure one side, it's going like this way, and the other side is going like that, but it happens like instantly. But nobody is able to predict which side is which and when. Nobody's able to predict the which way it's wiggling. And so this is where Albert Einstein, there's a famous quote. Albert Einstein says, God does not play dice. And just note that Albert Einstein believed in Spinoza's deity, which is kind of like just nature. There's a whole other topic area that you can research that. It's really interesting. So that's where the magic comes in. That's where, if you want to try to understand how it all kind of fits together, that's where these emergent properties are showing up, where like the machine is learning unexpectedly some language it's never seen before. Kind of like some of the shirts I wear. I wear like, I love to, when I travel, I love to buy shirts from a local language and just, because I love to see other cultures, because when I travel, is one of the things I love the most is the differences. What do people do differently than where I came from? And sometimes the higher that difference, the more dopamine I get, so to speak. That's a reward. As long as it's a benevolent difference. But anyways, it's just, machine intelligence is taking off like wildfire. Another great wise intellectual in the past, Marcus Aurelius, he called this like a mind fire. It's like a fire in the mind. That's kind of another way to look at reinforcement learning. Another terminology is a deus ex machina, if I pronounce that right. That was pointed out by a friend of mine that I meet every week. Basically, deus ex machina is often written in literature a long time ago as a character that comes out of nowhere and saves everybody, so to speak, or helps people They're in dire straits, or about to become extinct or something like that. That's kind of like what a Deus ex machina is. Is like can a Deus ex machina make Homo sapiens, or sapiens, humans, survive and be that 1% of species on Earth that makes it, that becomes interstellar. And I think we have a chance because we landed on the moon 6 times. And most people probably think we only landed once, but we actually landed, oops, I'm counting 5, 6 times. And that alone is demonstration that we are a very capable species. Someone asked Neil Armstrong once, why did we went to the moon? And he had a great answer for that. And basically it is, why do you think salmon swim upstream? It's the same general idea. It's to try to return to what we really are. And there's another great quote: "Is we are kind of like the universe observing itself. We are the universe observing ourselves temporarily, so from our own unique perspective, from when we were born to where we are now. The whole life history is the wave guide that creates our temporary mobile observation point. and so we are. You look at the stars, you're really kind of looking at a reflection of yourself inside your mind's eye. So, I'm getting deep and philosophical here, but we gotta get back to the practical world. But yes, so I highly recommend reading this book, and like I said, I'm gonna try to slowly go through it and see if I can take some ideas from a master's thesis in 1997 in this book, and maybe see if I can build something like TARS, the TARS robot, on Interstellar. It's with what is the Hollywood special effects guy? I forget his name. He was on MythBusters. I'll link you guys to him in a comment. He talks about TARS, and I'll link you guys to that video. From his perspective, is like the best form of or best robot type idea. In other words, what a robot ideally needs to be, kind of. But I really hope this all takes off and improves everybody's lives, because we're all trying to survive. We got a million problems we have to try to solve every day. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but really at the microscopic level we do it. It's like our individual molecular robots are actually moving inside our cells every second I speak here. So if you're alive, and so it's just, but this has the potential to free up all of us from the fear of not having enough food, from the fear of not having shelter, from the fear of not having health care, from the fear of a lot of things. Even though, and we have to accept the fact that we can't avoid an end in life, but at least, or some kind of negative in life, but at least I think this whole machine intelligence has the potential to make the world a much better place if we do it correctly. And from my perspective, I really think that it needs to be done open source, at least for the small computers, or just a few CPU, or one CPU, or one GPU, graphics processing unit, or one custom semiconductor chip. I really think that needs to be done open source. It's just because I try to look at us from a species perspective, uh, not so much as a artificial boundary perspective. Um, just to try to make a better world for everybody, and help people psychologically handle this, and psychologically and economically uh, proceed forward in this new world, in a sense. Even though this technology is probably from the 1990s, I mean, I was kind of simultaneously shocked and not shocked at the disclosure in the lawsuit between Elon Musk and OpenAI, where it says, I'll link you guys to it in the comments, the technology, the core technology is from the 1990s, and the first edition of this book came out in 1990, before 1997, or I mean, at least in 1997, at least for one person. I know. I give, I don't know why Professor Sutton and Bartow are not like have the Turing Award or that sort of thing, but you have to recognize that the world is not fair, and I wish they'd teach that in school, but they don't teach it in school. I wish the world was more fair. But the father of machine intelligence, I would contribute to Sutton and Bartow and all the people that reference in the book, and all the people that are not named that are not referenced in the book. But so it has to recognize that, and it's good. There is, I mean, another great book, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, that helps you understand this kind of behavior, where it's the capital, which is not always intelligent, is flowing towards people that probably are not the ones that deserve it as much as, like I see Professor Sutton and Bartow, they probably deserve more of that capital. But again, like I said, money and intelligence are not 100% correlated. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite, where money is not smart at all. It's like the opposite of smart. So, but it's an interesting world, and I just hope we can make it for the better. I hope we don't. I hope we can be a lot more peaceful instead of all this amygdala brain activity between nations that use exothermic free demolition for a bunch of construction projects. So if we could learn to, if we want to do demolition projects, why don't we just build robots on other planets and let them build buildings, and then we'll have them destroy it, and then we'll see which one's better. Then the winner can get a cupcake or something, or a cherry or whatever. So I wish we could be a little bit better. The skippers of the countries are not the best people sometimes, especially the ones that start wars. I'm not real impressed with. But it was really good to see that the defense system in Israel was able to successfully destroy 99% of the incoming missiles. It reminds me of the game Missile Command. I'll send a link in the comments. Missile Command. But supposedly some of that defense system may have had some machine intelligence in it. So that's a little comforting, but it's just, we could do a lot better than what we are. I'd much rather see rockets to Mars. I'd much rather see 300 rockets. Why can't the Iranians build rockets to Mars and have people walk on Mars? Why are they so? Can they be a little more smarter and do that? But instead, I mean, I understand that I just if Israel, I mean, I don't know what I'm saying here, and I don't know anything, but I kind of think, like, instead of retaliating, Israel could just say, okay, we're going to take all the ships that come out of Iran, and we're just gonna check the cargo for weapons, and then we're just gonna give it to Gaza. That's one way to help solve this multi variable problem instead of just retaliating. Maybe retaliate strategically instead of tactically, and because just the world's got a mental health problem at the national scale. There's like, I look at war as just like, it's just like the leaders need to be seek psychotherapy. That's what the problem is the leaders just not brave enough, not man enough to go see a therapist. So instead, they just end up destroying themselves. But anyways, that's my rant. Almost 2 hours. Feel free to comment. Like I said, hopefully I'm more than the single person myself watching this whole video. If you watch this whole video, you probably watching too long. But anyways, take care of yourself. I gotta end. I'm kind of melting here, and I'm just gonna stop recording. All right, so take care of yourself. Bye.